This is Clash of Clans, one of the most popular mobile games of all time, with over 75 million people playing it every single month. The thing is, there's only so many times I can spam my troops in this one area before it starts to get kinda stale. I'm a game developer, and that got me thinking, what if I took another beloved childhood game of mine, Bloons Tower Defense, and kinda just... Oh no. Alright, here's the plan. Big castle, enemies run out of castle in waves, similar to how the Bloons work, but instead of placing your own enemies like in Clash of Clans, you place the defenses. And at the end of each wave, you'll receive some amount of gold, which you can then use to expand your base. Alright, Clash of Clans is played on a grid of green tiles with two alternating colours. So I wrote this checkerboard shader which allows us to map the black and white cells to whatever colour we want. I then told my friend Berg over here to go away and model me some environment art to make this place look, well, less shit. And while he got to work on that, I decided to do some market research. Alright, we're going full goblins. You are no match for me. Shit. Anyway, Berg came back to me with 3 models. A tree, which I then scattered around the edge of the map, this castle, which is where the enemies are going to come out of, and finally the town hall. Berg, mate, is this a standard of work that we strive for here? No. No, mate, it isn't, is it? How about you go back to your silly little desk and do it again? So, while he gets to work on that, let's talk defenses. Out of all the defenses in the game, I think the cannon is probably the easiest and most iconic, so we'll start with that. Clash of Clans, or COC for short, has like 27 different cannons depending on what level it is. But I think I'm going to go with level 8. The model was easy enough, and once I put it in the game, it looked beautiful. Trust me. I've played a lot of COC games, and I've spent a lot of time playing on COC itself. I mean, if there was some sort of COC competition, I think we'd probably come first. Next, we need some sort of way to place our cannon using the mouse. So I looked at how Clash of Clans does this, and it seems that there's 2 main parts. First off, we need a green grid underneath the defense, which shows the amount of space that it's going to take up. I implemented this by modifying the checkerboard shader from earlier to allow for highlights in a grid pattern. And the second thing that I noticed is this flashing effect, which I implemented with yet another shader. All in all, I think this is looking pretty good. So to cap it off, I added a UI bar at the bottom which displays both the defense you're trying to build, as well as the amount of gold that it'll set you back. Now, one big difference between what we're trying to do and Bloons Tower Defense is that all the balloons follow this singular winding path around the level. However, our enemies need to be able to walk wherever they want. This is where pathfinding comes in. Most games use some sort of pathfinding. It's a thing that moves your character where you click in League of Legends and RuneScape, or the way that enemies are just able to completely body you in Risk of Rain 2. The main benefit of using pathfinding as opposed to just moving in a straight line is that you avoid any obstacles that may lie between you and your destination. But before I tell you about that, if you're just getting started in game development or have some younger siblings that you want to get into game dev, then let me introduce you to today's sponsor, Sober. Sober is an easy to use free game making platform to make games without any code whatsoever. And it's built for mobile, so you can even make games while driving. They asked me to tell you not to do that. You can make anything from an RPG to a parkour game, and all these games can be made multiplayer with no extra code required. If you do want to try your hand at some logic though, Sober has a node-based programming system that allows you to add a little extra oomph to your creations. Sober releases in closed alpha on February 6th, and you can get access by using code Barji. So go sign up at sober.xyz now. There's 2 main ways that pathfinding is typically tackled in games: nav meshes and A star. Nav meshes work by looking at all of the collision data for your scene and baking a walkable surface, which means that in our game we're going to have to bake that thing every time we spawn a new defense. So the alternative A star is much better. A star can be implemented on a grid, making the pathfinding lightning fast in this game. So the first thing we need to do is represent our grid in code and then store the corresponding world position in each cell. I've added some red spheres to show this working in game. Next up, I wrote a method to convert 2D mouse coordinates to a grid cell. Using this, we can now move our cannon anywhere on the grid. Each cell also holds the type of defense that currently occupies it. We can then use that data to stop defenses from being placed on top of one another. Now that we've got this system in place, it's easy to add other builds like walls, for example. And look, they even connect. I'm actually way more proud of that than I should be. Anyway, onto the actual pathfinding. Unfortunately for us, Godot doesn't have any libraries for this, seeing as it's just a little baby engine, which means I had to code the entire thing from scratch. This took like 2 days. Was it worth it? Probably not, but everything does seem to be working, and these little blue guys are pathfinding towards their destination. Alright, so it's time to say goodbye to our beloved blue cube, and say hello to Barjarian. Get it? It's like barbarian, but Barji. I animated our barbarian in Mixamo and gave him this little sword. I then put them into the game and added a horizontal offset to stop them from clumping together when running. I then coded a simple damage and health system, so now the barbarians will move towards the closest build and start attacking it. Right now though, the cannons are kind of defenseless, so it's time to model a cannonball. And I also made this orange flame trail that follows behind it. I don't know if that's realistic, but it's something. And finally, I made it so the cannon rotates towards the closest enemy before shooting them. Alright, it looks like Berg is finally done renovating the town hall. Let's pull that into the game. Oh, Berg. This is incredible. The big tower on the side, the accenting on the roof, those little knobbly bits that castles all seem to have for some reason. Oh mate, you've really outdone yourself here. Our game is actually coming along really well, but one thing that's missing is the classic Clash of Clans health bars. Looking into this, it seems that they have a two-tone design with some slightly curved edges. Creating a shader for that was just a case of reusing that checkerboard shader, which at this point seems to be doing everything in the game. The health bar also interpolates between green and red depending on the entity's health, and if you don't know what interpolate means, don't worry. Neither do I. Right, so at this point, I kind of just got the urge to play the game. So there's a basic wave system, and right now it should spawn 3 enemies for every wave. Oh no, that's not supposed to be happening. Once I did actually get that working though, the game was surprisingly fun. We need a little more content though, so I started on some more defenses and enemies. First up is the archer, who has this beautiful set of lips. I also modeled this archer tower, as we kind of get a 2-for-1 deal on the archer. In game that looks like this, but there's no bow. So I modeled the bow and synced it to the animation. Next I made an arrow, but one thing I really wanted the arrow to have was a trail that follows it through the air. And I assumed that there would be some easy way to do this in Godot, but no, there isn't. And while I could have just left it and cut my losses, I instead decided to spend the next 3 days just writing a trail renderer from scratch. If you want to play around with that, the source code's on Patreon, as well as the source code for this entire game. Anyway, here's that in game, and I'm actually quite glad that I wasted all that time because this looks far better than I ever imagined. Oh, and I also added this smoke effect when anything gets destroyed. This isn't in Clash of Clans, but it looks sick, so we're keeping it. So now we've got archers, archer towers, barbarians. The only logical step is giants. Once again, I modeled this guy in Blender, and this is by far the best model I've ever made. I mean, look at his hairline, it's perfect. He works pretty much the same as the barbarian logic-wise, so there's not much to do. He's just working. The same can be said about the wizard, but he's pretty much just an archer. I modeled and animated him with this anime fireball animation thing, and then for the fireball itself, I used a particle system that spawns a fire sprite with some random orientations. So before we add the final touches and actually test this thing, I want to improve how the game looks. You see, in Clash of Clans, there's not just trees everywhere like in our game. There's a beach, some little caves for the shops, and some little paths leading out. So I wanted to stay true to that while putting my own spin on it. So I modeled a cliff face and then kind of deforested half the map. For the rest of the forest, I decided to sprinkle in some mushrooms. For some reason, this blue fog in the background felt really out of place now, so I did some color correction to give the scene a more warm and magical feel, and I'm actually quite happy with how this turned out. To actually round off the gameplay, I implemented some UI to show how much gold you have, and so the final thing to do is implement sound effects. And for most of these, I kind of just grabbed them from a sound library, and you'll hear those in a second. But first, I needed something for in between the waves, so I kind of attempted to make the famous sound. Here's that. Alright, so here's the first playthrough of Skirmish of Badmen. Starting off with 2 cannons and what seems to be a wall. There's a barbarian coming in from the east and another coming in from the west with an archer not far behind. Oh, and contact has been made. Our cannon is just eating through that archer. There's only one measly barbarian left. He doesn't stand a chance. Alright, wave 2. Let's add 2 more cannons and expand that northern wall. All right, that's a lot more enemies this time, mostly coming in from the north it seems, but still no match for our army of cannons. All right, wave 3, that is a lot of enemies. Oh god, they've made contact with the cannon. Wave 4, this is our first round with giants in it, but still I don't think it's any match for our defenses. And the next few waves were a breeze. I did not expect this. Oh god, guys, run. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I don't really think releasing this is wise, seeing as it is just Clash of Clans, but if you want to check out the source code, it's on my Patreon, as I said, and I've got a lot more content this year, so please make sure to subscribe. Click here to watch my previous video on my new space multiplayer game I'm making, and I'll see you soon.